Shai Tamasi is a media personality in North America, presenting on Cityline, which streams into over 70 million homes. Originally from Israel and having served in the Israel Defense Forces, Shai now uses his platform to share the truth about Israel, even though he has sometimes had to pay a price for it. Shai came to a JTV event at Nottingham University, where we spoke about his own story and also discussed how he tackles the tough issues around Israel and Zionism.
Shai Tamasi.
Yes.
You are a popular media personality in Canada, just in case anyone didn't know that.
And the US.
And the US.
We're 70 million across North America.
Wow, it's nearly as big an audience as JTV, but you'll get there. And you're also an unlikely Israel advocate, and we're going to get into those areas. But what I want to start by doing is kind of understand your background. Let's go all the way back to your time in Israel. You were part of the IDF for a while.
I was, yes.
Talk to us about that.
So 3 years, of course, like every Israeli, has to serve. For me, it was really important. I had the opportunity, if I wanted not to, because my parents were working outside of Israel, and I had the opportunity to be actually in North America and not have to go back. That was never an option for me, not growing up.
Why was that?
My family was always extremely Zionist. Israel was always, our homeland. The fact that my parents worked abroad was not in any way a comment on whether or not we wanted to be in Israel or not. It was an economic decision that we made. But Israel is our home. And being an Israeli in the situation that Israel is in today and in our climate, it means that every Israeli has to serve.
Would you have felt a sense of shame, do you think, had you not done it?
You know,
was there peer pressure, or just was it simply, these are my values?
See, here's the thing. In Israel, in Israeli society, the very first question when you sit down with somebody is, oh, how are you? What do you do? Where do you go to school? Where did you serve? That's kind of the thing that ties Israelis together. Unfortunately, it's not something that we're excited that we have to do. It's a necessity. It's definitely something that's instilled in us from a very young age, and it's a sense of pride, absolutely. When I went in, also, I have the opportunity, if I want to say I wanted to do something administrative versus combat. It was never a question of, did I want to do administrative? It was always a question of, I want to give to my country as most as I possibly can.
And so what part of the IDF did you serve in?
So I served in Handasa Kravit, which is combat engineering. In times of war, if that ever did break out, that would mean that I would have to work to build bridges for terrain.
And did time of war break out when you were serving?
Time of war never broke out. There were tensions, but it was, yes, I know, shocking. Yeah, there were tensions, but no, war never broke out. It was important to me to serve in a way that I could give the most that I possibly could to my country, but I also wanted to be able to make sure that my time in the Army was spent developing my intelligence as well in terms of my actual mindset. So, sometimes people go into the Army and they do something that's so mundane that afterwards we go to school, we don't go to university right from high school, and you sometimes forget and you fall into a lull a little bit. And I wanted to make sure that it was something that kind of kept me going. So engineering was something that was able to have both, answer both.
And how did you have that engineering background?
I didn't.
So you self-taught?
Well, not self-taught. When you go into the Army, everybody goes into basic training as long as you have a certain level of, we do what are called psychometric tests. If you rank a certain level, then they teach you basically.
Right. I think you also made a really interesting point about how the IDF plays an amazing role in creating social cohesion, in a sense, because it breaks down class barriers. David Cameron tried to create a national citizens sort of service for young 16-year-olds because he recognized that there's something powerful in having something that all people have a national duty to be part of, regardless of age, ethnicity, gender, background, wealth. So I think that's definitely quite a powerful point. You then got into the world of media.
Yeah.
Talk to us, because that was not part of the plan.
That was never part of the plan. From a very young age, I always was very interested in architecture and design in particular. And I wanted to study what you guys call interior architecture, what in North America is interior design, not to be confused with decorating. And oftentimes people will say, well, oh, is it the same? It's not the same thing. It's interior architecture. So it's actually building. But that was always the plan. That's something that I wanted to do. And when I started to do that, I had actually met one of my clients who was a big television producer in North America. And he just kind of liked my vibe, and he said to me, would you ever consider doing television? And I was like, well, yeah, obviously. I was like, who wouldn't want to do television? And I did a screen test, and the rest is history. I kind of got into it, and
what area of television did he put you into?
So I am a lifestyle expert on one of North America's biggest and longest-lasting television shows, Cityline. It's a lifestyle program, so each day has a different topic. Thursdays are interior design, Fridays are fashion. Those are the 2 days that I'm an expert on.
And who's viewing this?
70 million people across the U.S. So it's predominantly a female audience, but it's a popular show. It's a popular show. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Now, there came a time which we were discussing on the phone last week, which I found really engaging, where you decided to discuss Israel on your channel. What happened?
Okay, so in 2013, I was given the opportunity, and it was an amazing opportunity to be able to take the entire crew back with me to Israel. I go back every year to visit family, obviously, and I had that opportunity. And I wanted to be able to show Israel through my eyes, through the eyes of a citizen, not through politics, without the political microscope that Israel is constantly under. Just Israel from a citizen's standpoint. And it was an opportunity that was completely, I am so grateful for, because it really afforded me an opportunity to open it up to an audience that might have never been able to see it and only understood Israel from what they saw on CNN, on BBC, on Sky News, whatever it is. That was okay until 2014, when Tzuk Eitan, which is a protective edge, broke out.
That was conflict between Israel and Gaza.
Correct. The last biggest one. Being as openly, Israeli as I am, and I never hid that fact ever, but having that trip that went back and people actually seeing me engage that way opened me up for, all of a sudden, a lot of threats. I received death threats. I received. I mean, it wasn't a secret where I worked. Our studios are where our studios are.
And you're receiving these death threats. Why? Because people did you make it quite clear on the programs that you are from Israel?
Oh yes, all the time. I mean, there's never been a time where I've tried to hide it. I mean, I'm proud of who I am.
And during Protective Edge itself, were you discussing the politics, the conflict itself?
Not at all. Nothing. No. It was. It had nothing to do with that, and that was what was so interesting. So the show is a lifestyle show. We don't talk about politics. We don't talk about that. We look at the kind of the nicer parts of life.
Right.
And it had nothing to do with that. And my social media just started blowing up. It was, the horrible pictures of people from all over the world, because all people have to do now is find a hashtag with Israel or whatever it is, and my social media was blowing up with pictures of me spliced with Hitler, calling me horrible names, baby killer, child killer, and I have to preface, and I hate having to preface by saying I've never in my life killed a child. I've never in my life killed a person. So it's just a horrible thing to have to hear.
People do
Well, no, of course not.
Yeah.
And it's this stigma and this horrible kind of wash that's put over all Israelis that it's wrong, and to be perfectly honest, it's quite bigoted.
Right. But there came a particular moment where your producers grabbed you backstage and they said something about it.
Yes, 100%. So there was one of the producers who works on the show, was a little bit, I don't think she was had ill intentions, but she didn't really know much about Israel. And for you guys who don't know, one of the kind of the tipping points during that operation was when the 3 young teenagers were kidnapped and killed by Hamas, and then their bodies were discarded in the West Bank. And I had posted something on my personal Facebook page about that. So for a very long time, Instagram and Twitter were for public. My Facebook was for my friends. And she had made a comment about that wasn't true. It never happened. It was propaganda. And I was so offended by it, so overly offended by it, I didn't really know how to deal with it. It was coming from a place and from a person who had known me for years, never had ever inquired about anything about my life, about my time in Israel, about who I was, about my family, about my history, and yet had such a strong opinion about what she thought was the truth when it came to that. And she was opinionated enough to be able to actually put that on my feed. And I was taken aback by that, and I didn't know how to deal with that.
Where was she getting information from?
Where do so many people get their information from? They get it from their own social media channels. They get it from wherever they're getting it from. And I mean, it was proven after, of course. Did I ever receive an apology? No. Did I ever say, listen, I misspoke, I overstepped, I shouldn't have? And the sad thing is I really thought that at that point she would have come to terms with the fact that maybe, me, you and I work together, maybe we have the opportunity here to have a dialogue. Not only did we not have the dialogue, many years later, actually when I was speaking at the Camera Conference in Boston this last summer, she posted another thing on her social media that was, again, completely false, completely wrong, completely one-sided, without ever again asking me. And I came to the realization that sometimes, no matter how hard I try, and no matter how hard I try to bridge that gap between people,
but wasn't there a moment you were telling me about where a producer came to you and said, "Please stop talking about Israel"?
Well, in the studio, yeah. So basically, it's not stop talking about Israel in general. It was stop, bringing the politics into the studio at a certain point. Now, my producers, and I must preface by saying my producers have always been extremely supportive, always, of me and my voice about Israel. There was never ever an issue with me not or having to hide who I was. It created. You have to understand that in Canada, I'm assuming here, like in Britain, is not quite like in Israel or in the US. People are very polite. People are very, they want to kind of keep the status quo and keep the waters calm. This was a way to keep the waters calm, and I didn't disagree with it. It was just frustrating for me that I couldn't, I couldn't be able to say what I needed to say. That said, at the end of it, it was always very supportive of my voice and what I felt like I needed to say. And working in media, it's media. I mean, news is part. It's not what I do in media, but it's part of my company. And they're always very honest and very open about it, and I'm grateful for that. But
So, what kind of topics, when you're on camera, what kind of topics do you discuss with regard to Israel? And what kind of negative comments get thrown your way?
Well, I mean, I try to keep it non-political. And the reason that I do that is because political, I mean, you can turn on the TV any day of the week and you can find something political about Israel. So I tried to look at Israel through the eyes of a citizen rather than Israel through the eyes of that political microscope. And I've gotten mixed reviews about that. I mean, there are some times that I get people who say, I never knew that. I never knew that about Israel. I never knew that Israel had such a vibrant secular society. I thought it was very religious based. And then, of course, there are the other people who say, how can you talk about the things that you're talking about when certain things are happening politically in Israel? And my answer to them is always the same. Every country has their challenges. Every country has their challenges. Do you always just concentrate on the negative? No. I mean, I think that Israel gets an unfair balance on the negative, so why not talk about the positive and kind of give a counterbalance to it?
Absolutely, absolutely. And what would you say to people that feel, even when it comes to just the cultural issues, or even maybe identifying as an Israeli or a Jew? Some people say, I'm going to avoid doing that in order to get ahead at college or in my degree or in my job. Yeah. I know people who would withhold their political beliefs or association with Israel to get close to a college professor and do well in their dissertation. What would you say to people that feel that way? It makes sense.
Well, to me it doesn't make sense, and I'll tell you why it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to me because I feel like if you have to hide who you are, you're going to get nowhere in life. And that's something that I started to learn a little bit later in life. I was that person who, you have to understand, as an Israeli who starts working in Canada, that is a completely different culture and mindset. You try to tiptoe between, we say in Hebrew, you try to go between the drops of water and not to get wet. But sometimes you just have to be who you are. And at the end of the day, it's always going to come out. So why would you hide it and then have that backlash later on in life when people are like, we hired you or we thought you were this and you're not? I'm not ashamed of who I am, and unless you're ashamed of who you are, and that's something different. If there's something shameful that you think that you're doing, listen, hide it, but then you're ashamed of something that you're doing, so maybe you're not doing the right thing. If you're not ashamed of what you're doing, be loud, be proud, be who you are, and I don't see that being a trait, a characteristic that is going to help you well in life.
Yeah, we're going to get us shortly onto some more controversial areas of Israel and to discuss them and get into some nitty-gritty and issues, and we'll open it up to the audience soon. But just one final question I want to ask you, just on the more kind of media side, is what would you say? And I think the students here would appreciate this from whatever side of the political spectrum you're on. What are your top stylistic tips for presenting arguments in a persuasive way?
I think that the first and foremost is it has to be fact-based. There is so much fallacy out there. There's so much non-fact. There's so much fact that or fallacy that is disguised as fact or said to be fact. I think that the best way to combat ignorance is fact-based. And at the end of the day, and this is also a life lesson that took me quite a long time to learn, is that if someone is unwilling to accept facts because they are more willing to accept the fallacy based on nothing except for ignorance, then that's an ignorant person. And as much as I might try to get to that person, I can't win everybody over, and that's not my job to win everybody over. Sometimes it's just about speaking and, having somebody leave the room tonight. If everybody leaves here tonight and says, you know what, that guy, didn't like him. Anything he said I disagree with, but if there was one thing the next time that they have that conversation with their colleague or with their student or with their peer, and something triggers in their mind from something that I said that said, well, hold on, you just said something, but I remember hearing, then already we started a conversation that wasn't happening before, and that's a good thing.
Right, so know your facts, basically.
Know your facts, please.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Okay, fine.
To stay up to date with the latest JTV content, if you're on YouTube, click subscribe below the video and the alarm bell. And if you're on Facebook, click the like button, and under following, click see first.